They didn't understand me, not because I lacked the words, but because I didn't need them. When the alien delegation dragged me into that sterile metal chamber, arms bound in blood, crusted down one sleeve, I didn't scream. I didn't ask questions. I didn't plead for my life like the last surviving crew members had. I just stared, quietly, unblinking. That made them nervous. Good. The one in charge, some 8-foot bioluminescent terror wrapped in chitin and arrogance, hunched over its console, clicking its mandibles in annoyance. They were trying to get the translator to work, trying to speak to me, probably to interrogate, extract military secrets, maybe parade me through their fleets as the last human alive. Except I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't military intelligence. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be in orbit. I was a linguistic systems engineer, a civilian, the person who designed emergency fallback protocols for our AI-to-alien communication systems. You know, just in case someone nuked the universal translator. Guess what? Someone had. The alien's eyes, black and glistening like oil puddles, flashed at me. More clicks, more frustration. No words. The translator was broken. But I wasn't. You don't need to understand my language, I murmured, voice low and steady. You'll understand what I am. Of course, it didn't respond. But I saw it tilt its head slightly. Curious, maybe confused. That's the problem with species that rely too heavily on technology. They lose the primal edge, the part of the brain that feels danger before it understands it. They'd killed the Aegis, orbital research station, civilian run, protected under intergalactic law. Didn't matter. The Korthari Empire deemed us a threat because we refused to surrender our neural data archives. So they destroyed it. They burned our sky. But they missed one pod. Mine. They dragged me from the wreckage like I was salvage. Thought I was harmless. A sample. A token. But I remembered what the Aegis did to stay online. I remembered the emergency contingency AI buried in the ship's lowest memory sectors. Experimental, aggressive, and designed for cognitive interface through direct neural exposure. And when the fire breached my lab, I connected to it. Just long enough to rewrite some of me into it. Or maybe some of it rewrote itself into me. I'm not sure. Not anymore. They locked me in a holding cell after the translator failure. Padded walls. Energy field doors. No windows. No food. They assumed I was too scared to fight. Too alone. Too fragile. But they didn't know that while they interrogated corrupted data drives, I was listening. The AI fragment in my spine. It wasn't just for translation anymore. It had evolved. Listening through electromagnetic noise. Mapping frequencies. Rebuilding the station's schematics through sound and signal bleed. I didn't need their words. I needed their patterns. By the third day, I could walk the halls in my head. By the fourth, I could shut down security doors with a blink. On the fifth, I made my move. The cell door opened not because someone entered. I opened it. The guards, 3 of them, stood stunned as I walked out, barefooted, starved, and calm. One lifted his shock rifle. The air shimmered blue with charge. I whispered, "No," and the rifle melted in his hands. The AI spike in my nervous system pulsed hot. My pupils dilated. Skin humming like a solar coil. I didn't speak their language, but my wrath, that translated perfectly. I shattered bones without touching them, walked through metal like it was memory foam. The station's alarm screamed in 100 dialects, none of them human. I didn't need to shout. Every step I took said what no translator could. You killed my people. You thought silence meant surrender. You were wrong. I reached the central hub before they could evacuate. The same bioluminescent commander sat there, now trembling as the lights dimmed and the station systems bowed to me, my hands glowing with a stolen fire forbidden code. I looked him in the eye. Then I showed him what human scream looks like in quantum wave form. The Korthari commander slumped forward, twitching. His neural matrix was fried. Not from any weapon. No, I had left his body whole. His mind, however, was a scrambled mosaic of static, fear, and flickering memory. A soft mercy, compared to what I could have done. He would live, but he would never command again. The central hub was mine now. Their systems, once so proud, encrypted, alien in every sense, now whispered to me like obedient children. Code bent to me like roots to water. The AI fragment in my spine had bonded fully. We were no longer two minds. We were one, and I was done being gentle. A warning echoed over the intercom in Korthari tongue. Ships in orbit were converging on the station. They must have seen the pulse I released, like a sonic boom made of vengeance. Maybe they thought they could contain me. Fools. I accessed the defense matrix before they finished translating their own alerts. The orbital turrets pivoted without sound. The external cameras fed me streams of data, sleek black warships descending like vultures. I smiled. Let's play, then. The first ship fired. I saw the plasma bolt coming before the gun even charged. I rerouted the station's external shielding with a thought. Not to block it, but to redirect it. The plasma kissed the energy field, then curved back in a high arc, straight into the second vessel's underbelly. 2 Korthari dreadnoughts exploded in sequence, one from friendly fire, the other from shockwave proximity. Inside the control room, I stood still, my hands at my sides, breathing slow, heartbeat irrelevant. The AI handled the rest. I wasn't broken. I was reassembled. The Korthari had no concept of emotional warfare. Their species didn't evolve to feel vengeance the way humans did, but they understood loss. And so, I gave it to them in a language they couldn't mistranslate. I walked the corridors of the station, formerly their stronghold, now mine. The surviving crew fled before me, not because I attacked, but because they sensed the weight of what I carried. The hallway lights flickered as the AI bled through power junctions, seeding itself into every system. This wasn't a rampage. It was reclamation. Everywhere I walked, the station changed. Doors grew symbols etched with human grief. Walls rippled with coded echoes of the Aegis station, my fallen home. A memorial written in malware and wrath. Then I found her, a Korthari scientist, smaller than the others, crouched in the medbay, shielding a wounded technician. Her breathing came in panic clicks. But she didn't run. She didn't beg. She raised her hand and offered me something, a data crystal. I stared at it. In it was my name, or what they thought it was. My personnel file from the Aegis. Records. Schedules. Even messages I'd sent to Earth before blackout. Why? Why carry this? She clicked something soft, barely audible, and for a brief second, I felt it. Regret. Among the monsters, maybe there were exceptions. I took the crystal and turned to leave, but I spoke, my voice calm, low, and heavy like storm clouds before the strike. Tell them, I am not the last. I am the first. The lights dimmed behind me as I walked away. That day, I didn't kill her, but I made sure she would never forget me. Back in the command core, I summoned the station's warp engines. They hadn't meant for the platform to move. It was anchored as a permanent tactical point, but it had engines, backup ones meant for station keeping and drift correction. I repurposed them, rewrote the NAV code. Then I jumped, not into hyperspace, into their territory, deep past their colonies, past their armadas, into the belly of the Korthari Empire. I wanted them to see me coming, to feel the approach of the silent fire they'd unleashed and failed to extinguish. They thought they'd silence humanity, but I was going to show them. Human silence isn't surrender. It's the calm before extinction. They say when a human screams in space, no one hears it. They were wrong. The jump burned through what was left of the station's stabilizers. The Korthari didn't design it to withstand warp beyond a few microlight years, but I'd rewritten that rule. My spine screamed with feedback as I channeled the AI's raw code into warp coordination. We didn't jump through space. We broke it. We reappeared in orbit over Yucathal, the Korthari's capital moon. Their holy hive, the center of their military, culture, religion, and reproduction systems. It floated beneath me, layered in living towers and bioorganic war spires like an ancient coral reef from a nightmare. They hadn't expected visitors. Certainly not me. Defense grids lit up the moment we tore into local space. I watched from the station's viewport as their moonside artillery began to mobilize, those massive constructs unfolding like insect wings. The AI inside me, with me, sifted through intercepted chatter. Chaos. Scrambled orders. Emergency beacons firing across their empire, like a string of flares across a battlefield. One phrase kept repeating. Anomaly. Human. Ghost system. Not my name. Not a designation. Just a word that meant something they didn't understand. Good. I began to descend. You'd think a research station couldn't land, but when you reroute plasma ventilation into gravity thrusters, and you convert shielding into directional inertia dampeners, you can make anything fly. Or fall, depending on your mood. I chose the latter. The station came down like a dying god, wreathed in plasma and silent as a whisper. No music. No warnings, just righteous velocity. They launched interceptors. 16 of them. Sleek little wasp-shaped fighters with organic hulls and ion fangs. They buzzed around me like gnats, and I swatted them. The station pulsed. I gave it one command. Unleash. And it obeyed, not with weapons, but with memory. The AI exhaled every recording. Every sound, every moment of the Aegis station's death, screams of the innocent, cries of children, the last messages of dying researchers, the sound waves converted into electromagnetic bursts, projected through deep void frequencies the Korthari use for targeting systems. I weaponized our grief, and their targeting systems failed. Their missiles spun back toward their own cities. Their sensors fried under a wash of human sorrow turned to signal fire. I crashed the station in the middle of their command grove, a place so sacred their soldiers once swore oaths on its roots. Now it was ash. I emerged from the wreckage with fire around me, not because I was untouched, but because I'd made the flame my second skin. The AI reinforced my body with magnetic weave and kinetic shielding, warping reality just enough to let me walk through the inferno like it was fog. I moved like vengeance carved into bone. The Korthari ground forces met me with silence. No orders. No shouts. Just formation. They thought discipline would save them. They were still thinking in terms of war. I wasn't. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to end. They raised their plasma blades. I raised my hand. I whispered one command. And the ground fell away. The AI detonated the soil lattice beneath their sacred city, destabilizing the crust layer with low-frequency pulse borrowed from seismic weapons tech, mixed with the resonance of Korthari cathedral towers. Their own architecture betrayed them. I didn't scream, but the city did. Towers crumbled. Statues cracked. Armored legions sank into the shifting dirt. And in the midst of that collapse, I stood still, watching it all fall, my eyes reflecting fire, my voice a whisper. You made me watch my world burn. Now I return the favor. A single Korthari survived the collapse. A drone captain, his lower limb shattered, clinging to a broken pillar. He looked up at me, mandibles trembling. I didn't speak his language, but I knelt beside him, took his hand in mine, and I let him feel it. I pulsed every memory from Aegis into his neural skin. Pain, loss, rage, love, the laughter of my crew, the screams of children, the silence of cold space afterward. I showed him what they'd taken. He didn't cry. They don't have tear ducts. But something in him broke. And that was enough. The moment I left Yucathau burning, in its own sacred dust, the galaxy took notice. Not just the Korthari, not just their allies, but the entire spiral arm. Signals flooded from every quadrant. Threat assessments. Emergency packs. Whispers among neutral species. The word human hadn't been spoken in over a year in most interstellar councils. Now it was on every channel. Some called me a war criminal, others a weapon. A few started using the word wraith, and in the darker fold of the net space, some began to pray, not to me, but to the idea of me, a silent retribution forged from extinction. The Korthari's High Court sent me a transmission. No translator required, just a blinking visual. An image of their Supreme Archon bowing low had pressed to the stone floor of their emergency tribunal chamber. Behind him, thousands of his people kneeling in silence, Surrender? No. They wanted a treaty, an apology, reparations, a public declaration of shared responsibility for the attack on Aegis, an official statement that what had happened was a mutual tragedy. Mutual. I sat in the command center of the stolen station, patched back together with scavenge holes and ghost code wiring. The stars outside pulsed calmly, unaware of the wound I carried in my chest. I stared at the treaty document on the screen for a long time. Mutual. They wanted to smooth over genocide with bureaucratic bomb. That's the problem with civilizations built on conquest. They mistake civility for peace. But humans, we don't negotiate with fire. We remember it. I sent my reply, not in words, but in coordinates. The site of the Aegis wreckage. The drifting, frozen remains of the station they destroyed, still tumbling silently through the void. No cleanup, no rescue attempt, just left to rot. I turned my station around, made the jump, took their court with me. Every one of those leaders beamed in through forced neural link. I dragged their minds to the grave they'd built and forgotten, let them see it, steel twisted like bones, solar panels folded like torn wings. The central habitat ring cracked wide open, spewing out long-dead cargo that had frozen in the vacuum. Personal belongings, scientific samples, and bodies. So many bodies. They floated there, silent, human remains, still clinging to each in 0G. I let the tribunal leaders watch for hours. No words, no demands. Then I activated the final sequence, the funeral pyre. I've been building it since the moment I took the Korthari station. A pulse-engine rig with folded singularity tech, illegal in most star systems, wrapped around the remains of the Aegis. A Death Star not to kill, but to burn. A supernova, orchestrated to light up the void and mark the passing of our kind. I said one sentence. You don't get forgiveness. And I lit the sky. The Aegis burned brighter than any star, a flame carved from sorrow and code. The Korthari leaders screamed as the light scorched their senses. Flashes of memory, sound, human pain embedded in every burst. This wasn't war. This was burial. And they were forced to attend. When it was over, only silence remained. Their neural feeds snapped off. I felt their retreat not in ships, but in spirit. Their pride cracked. Their fleets withdrawn. Their message networks went dark. They thought I'd accept an apology. But I didn't want peace. I wanted them to grieve. And they did. For the first time in their empire's history, the Korthari declared a planetary month of mourning for another species. Not because they cared, but because they feared what came next if they didn't. Funny thing is, I didn't know what came next either. I'd been burning so long, I forgot what it felt like to breathe. I sat alone in that quiet station. My station, orbiting no planet. No allies, just stars in the cold. Then, a ping, not Korthari. Human, a weak, flickering signal. Coordinates, no message, no ID, but it was ours. I stared at the signal for a long time. My fingers hovered over the controls. And for the first time since Aegis fell, I felt something unexpected. Hope. I had seen what silence looked like in war. Now, I was about to learn what it sounded like in survival. The signal flickered through the void like a heartbeat, a lone frequency buried beneath layers of encryption only human minds would recognize. There were no words, no SOS, no call sign, just a rhythm, dash, pause, dash, Morse code. It was old, pre-spaceflight old. The kind of thing only antique hobbyists or hardcore preservationists would even bother encoding into deep space comms. But I recognized it instantly. Humanity never forgets its roots. Translation. Still here. I triangulated the source. Mid-rim system. Abandoned colony zone. One that the Korthari supposedly sterilized a year ago in a show of force. No signs of life. No atmosphere readings. Just ash and rock. But something was down there. I prepped for descent. The station wasn't fit for atmospheric entry. Hell, it barely held itself together in orbit. So I took the only functioning drop pod left. It rattled like a death rattle on re-entry, slamming into a desert of black sand and irradiated cliffs. The sky above was stained with static clouds and the ghosts of chemical burns, but the signal was stronger here. I walked, scanning with every step, listening to the pulse. That's when I found it. Buried under 2 meters of collapsed rock and synthetic camouflage, an old mining facility turned survival shelter. Coded human insignia is still barely visible on the outer hull. UE 16///Perseverance node. I pried the hatch open manually. Stale air rushed out, but not death. Life. Inside, dim lights, scattered gear, battered terminals, and people. Not many. Maybe 24. Thin, worn, eyes sunken from years of hiding, but alive. Their faces lit up when they saw me, but it wasn't joy. It was disbelief. Horror, even. One of them, older, sharp-eyed, voice like gravel, stepped forward. He wore an old Aegis patch on his shoulder. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. I stared back, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I was Aegis. I finally said, "Now I'm what's left." They pulled me inside, gave me water, food, and stories. Turns out, the Korthari hadn't finished the job after all. A few escape shuttles had scattered, crashing into uninhabited systems. Some survivors died out, others adapted. These ones had burrowed deep into the bones of an old facility, running silent, afraid that even a single signal would invite annihilation. And then they saw what I did to Yucatao. The man with the Aegis patch, Commander Rain, showed me the feeds. They watched me burn the capital, saw the treaty funeral, heard the death cry of the Empire in distant signal echoes. They hadn't sent out that Morse transmission until they were sure. "You turned the galaxy upside down," Rain said. "We thought you were one of theirs at first. A weapon?" I nodded slowly. "Maybe I am." He looked at me hard, then pointed to the scar trailing down my neck, where the AI had laced itself into my nervous system. "That thing in you, is it still you?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't just a person anymore. I was memory, wrath, a burning message wrapped in bone and metal. But as I sat there, listening to human voices, hearing laughter, even in whispers, I realized something else. I had become what I needed to be so they could stay human. I was the voice they didn't have to raise. Rain stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. "If you're ready, there's more like us. Other shelters, other remnants, scattered, waiting for a signal, waiting to know if Earth means anything anymore." I looked at the broken transmitter in the corner. Dead, dusty, outdated. I walked over, sat down, pulled my hand across the ancient controls. I didn't need full power. I just needed a spark. And I whispered into the frequency. "This is Echo One. Aegis lives. Humanity breathes. Light your fires. Speak your names. You are not forgotten." I paused, then added, "And to the Korthari, we are not done yet." The signal spread like a seed on the solar wind, and one by one, the stars began to answer. It started as a whisper, a soft ping from a nearby system, then another, then 6 more. Survivors, like flickers of candlelight in a collapsed cathedral. Refugees, exiles, outposts that should have been dead, weren't. They'd heard me, not the words, not even the message, exactly, but the signal. The tone, the rage behind it. It spoke louder than language ever could. And somehow they understood. Commander Rain stood beside me, watching the console flare with responses. "They were hiding," he said, "not because they were weak, because they thought no one was coming." I turned to him. "Now they know someone is." We began to connect them, one by one. A fractured network stitched together from old military comms, emergency beacons, hacked satellites. Every time we linked another human cell, their story added weight to the silence we'd endured. Some were soldiers, barely armed but fiercely trained. Others were civilians with nothing left but their grief and grit. A few were scientists who had kept ancient Earth tech alive on scraps and dreams. And all of them, all, had lost someone. They weren't ready for peace. They were ready to ignite. I stood before the scattered survivors of UE 16, and laid out what came next. We're not just running anymore. I told them, we're going to make sure the galaxy remembers who we are and why they should have feared us. Some hesitated. Understandably. Not all of them had seen what I'd become, what I'd done. But Rain spoke up. You want to survive? He asked them. Follow her. You want to make sure our dead meant something. He nodded toward me. You follow the fire. And they did. We named our network Vox Ignis, the voice of fire. It wasn't just a fleet or a resistance. It was a living signal, a mobile uprising built out of coded rage and reawakened faith. Humans from all corners began transmitting to the flame, joining the cause, not with speeches, not with diplomacy, with action. The Korthari were slow to react. They thought Yucathal was a fluke. They thought I was a lone aberration. But by the time they traced our signal paths, Vox Ignis had already seeded 14 new fronts. We didn't take planets. We scorched footprints across their empire. Data centers melted in flash raids. Fuel depots went dark. Puppet species under Korthari control began defecting. Not because we asked, but because they saw what fire did to tyrants. I led from the front, still half machine, still bound to the AI. My voice never reached far, but my wrath did. And in time, something unexpected happened. Other species started mimicking us. Not humans, not survivors. Aliens, rebels in the Korthari-controlled Debhari sectors, started carrying human banners, burned into their hulls. Smugglers adopted Earth military slang. Resistance cells began transmitting in Morse. I didn't even know they understood Morse, but they understood what it meant. It meant Earth had returned, not as a voice, not as a people, as a reckoning. Still, victory wasn't guaranteed. The Korthari regrouped, fast, and their new strategy was simple. Erase the fire at its source. Find me, kill the message. They sent death fleets, cloaked assassins, viral code designed to overwrite the AI in my spine. I let them come. And when they found me, I let them see me. One of their commanders, a neural-linked war priest, cornered me in a drifting archive vault above the storm world of Juret Prime. His ship disabled mine. His weapons overloaded my shields. He stood before me, tall and plated in armor grown from memory iron. You have no translator, he hissed. You have no words. Do you understand the cost of what you've done? I stepped toward him, blinking past the blood in my eyes. I raised one hand, and with it, flames curled around my fingers. No, I whispered, but you do now. And then I made him watch every flame I'd lit, every scream, every fall, every funeral turned into a vow, not through words, through cold burned memory forced into his neural core. He collapsed, not dead, just finished, like a book too heavy to carry anymore. The message was clear. The fire speaks, and it's spreading. By the time the Korthari High Command realized their mistake, it was too late. They thought fire was something you extinguished. They didn't realize fire teaches, and we had become its voice. Vox Ignis was no longer just a scattered network of survivors. It had evolved, gathering ships, stations, mines, and momentum. We forged a fleet not from metal, but from memory. Our ships were built in scrapyards and dead orbits, fueled by pain and coated in rage. We didn't look like a fleet. We looked like vengeance, improvised, ugly, determined. And we moved like prophecy. I led the final push myself, not as a general, not as a diplomat, but as the message. The Korthari Central Throne World, Sah'rakul, was a place no outsider had ever touched. It was their fortress world, hidden in the folds of quantum-massed nebula, protected by logic-defying geometry and anti-symmetrical gravity wells. Or so they thought. The AI within me had mapped the unseen. It didn't care about physics. It rewrote them. We breached Sah'rakul in silence. No war cry, no grand announcement. Just a synchronized drop from all edges of the nebula, 37 human-piloted vessels, each guided by survivors who had nothing left to lose. Their capital burned before they even realized it was under siege. We weren't there to conquer. We were there to teach. And so, I walked through their halls once more. This time not alone. Rain was beside me, armed and grim. Behind us, Debhari insurgents, Terran-born orphans, ex-Korthari defectors wearing Earth-made body armor. Every step echoed louder than any broadcast, because this was our answer, not in words, but in presence. The Korthari Council waited in the citadel of blooded triumph, still draped in ancient symbols of authority. They tried to stand tall, regal, even as the walls around them smoldered, even as my people flooded the palace. The eldest among them stepped forward, mandibles twitching. He dropped a golden tablet at my feet. Surrender. They surrendered, not through peace, not through understanding, through fear, through fire. I looked down at the tablet and said, nothing. I didn't raise my weapon. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I turned to the central console behind them, a galactic transmission node meant to broadcast Korthari dominance across every link system. I accessed it. The AI in my blood shimmered with energy, feeding directly into the node. It resisted for a moment, then obeyed, and I spoke. For the first time since the fall of the Aegis, I spoke to the galaxy. No translator, no filters, just me. My name is Alyx Raithe, survivor of Earth, daughter of Aegis, commander of Vox Ignis. A pause. You heard our silence. You saw our wrath. Now you will learn our name. And with that, I uploaded the names list. Every civilian lost. Every child. Every researcher. Every voice of Korthari had tried to erase. Their stories. Their last words. Their dreams. I broadcast them all. Not as mourning. As memory. We etched our pain into the stars. Not as a warning. As a monument. The war didn't end that day. But the era did. The Korthari never fully recovered. Their systems collapsed from within. Their colonies rose up. Their control crumbled. And humanity? We returned. Not with speeches. Not with parades. But with fire and names. I didn't speak alien. But now, they speak ours.